great to have you with me, Phil Cleary, podcaster, writer, long-time campaigner to end men's violence against women, one-time independent member of the Australian Parliament, and former Australian rules footballer and coach. In this memorable people and places video series, a bookend to my Cleary Independent podcasts, we'll travel the world unearthing people and places with a story to tell. Episode 3 of this memorable people and places series provides a synopsis of the World War II documentary I'm working on. It's called Gladys and the Brunswick Boys.
My grandfather, Teddy Dorian, a labourer from Brunswick, served during the Second World War.
In April 1941, Ted Dorian, Ted's best mate Michael Parlin, their mate Billy Ottaway, and Ted's eldest brother Roy were sent to Greece with the Australian 6th Division in an attempt to thwart the German advance. How different life had looked for those Brunswick boys from in and around Barry Street under the imposing Hoffman brickworks when they met at the end of 1939 in the Union Hotel and decided to enlist.
The original bar in the Union Hotel in Union Street, West Brunswick, the haunt of the Brunswick boys.
Having survived the horrors of the Great Depression, the Dorian brothers and their mates in Brunswick were in the midst of a new and better life when Prime Minister Bob Menzies committed Australia to Britain's war with Germany.
Fellow Australians, it is my melancholy duty to inform you that in consequence of a persistence by Germany in her invasion of Poland, Great Britain has declared war upon her, and that as a result, Australia is also at war.
The Brunswick boys didn't vote for Menzies' Conservative Party or share his love of Britain and the British Empire. They were working class men who'd been educated at St Ambrose's in Brunswick, a parish with a rich Irish Catholic heritage. Like so many other Brunswick men, they saw a trip to the Middle East and Europe as an adventure, one that would end in victory in the blink of an eye. Sadly, they were wrong, and it would be a war that would take a toll on their lives in ways they could never have imagined. Roy Dorian had left 2 young children at home in Brunswick when he departed the Barry Street house he shared with Dolly, the mother of his second child. "200 metres away at 24 Barry Street, Teddy Dorian's wife Gladys was caring for their 2 children. She was only 23 years of age when her husband was at the wheel of his truck carrying Australian soldiers fleeing the Germans in Greece.
Such was the speed of the German advance through Greece, it was decided that General Thomas Blamey should retreat. On the 24th of April, he flew out of Greece. Left behind were thousands of Allied soldiers.
Unfortunately for Teddy Dorian, he couldn't make it onto the Costa Rica with his brother Roy when the ship steamed out of the Kalamata harbour. Although the Costa Rica would be sunk by the Luftwaffe, Roy Dorian and his mates from the 2nd 7th Battalion were fortunate enough to make it onto the Hereward and escape to Crete. By the time Roy was disembarking at Suda Bay in Crete, Teddy Dorian was being rounded up by the Nazi army in Kalamata. After 6 weeks in the horrendous Corinth POW camp, in mid-June, Teddy Dorian and his Brunswick mates Michael Parlin and Billy Ottaway began the task of crossing Brelos Pass on foot. 2 weeks before Teddy Dorian began that trek across Brelos Pass, his brother Roy Dorian had been retreating across Crete with the Nazi army in pursuit. On 27 May 1941, his 2nd 7th Battalion, with the 2nd 8th Battalion and 5 New Zealand battalions, engaged in a withering hand-to-hand battle with an elite Nazi battalion in the olive groves of 42nd Street outside the village of Sikalaya. Alongside Dorian was legendary Indigenous soldier Reg Saunders and the 28th Maori Battalion, which engaged in a terrifying haka before entering the battle. Official records indicate that more than 250 German soldiers died in the battle. At home in Barry Street, Roy's wife Dolly and Teddy's wife Gladys anxiously waited for news. At 24 Barry Street, Brunswick West, Gladys and Dolly would regularly meet to share photos and letters from their respective husbands. On 14 June 1941, Roy Dorian put pen to paper in a letter that exuded love for the woman he called Dolly and carried unbridled excitement about his miraculous escape from Crete, the island of doom. As fate would have it, the letter arrived in Barry Street, Brunswick, about the same time that Gladys was told her husband was not dead, but was in fact a prisoner of war in Stalag 18A in Austria. The news prompted Gladys to ask Dolly to take a photo of her in her wedding dress that she could send to her husband. Amidst the expression of love was the amusing, "Hurry up and come home, as we miss you a lot, dear." A couple of months later, Gladys received a remarkable group photo showing her husband alongside his best mate, Brunswick tough man Michael Peggy Parlin, on a hill above the POW camp in South Austria in the village of Lysark, where he'd been sent in late August 1941. Closing in on her 8th birthday when she saw her dad in the photo, my mum Lorna treasured it. In time she would pass the photo on to me for safekeeping. In 2023, I found the exact place where that photo was taken. It was a moving experience to walk across the very ground where Parlin and Dorian had knelt side by side and looked into the enemy's camera lens. As Dolly and Gladys pored over the letters coming home, they couldn't have imagined the tragic sequence of events that would eventually flow from Roy's escape and Teddy's capture. These, however, weren't the only events that would impact profoundly on Gladys's life. Pregnant to Teddy Dorian before her 15th birthday, as the Great Depression ravaged Brunswick's working class, Gladys was no ordinary woman. 2 children and the trials and tribulations of war was no obstacle to her becoming a much-admired worker at Miller's Rope Works, where she spun yarn with indefatigable energy during and after the war. It was here in 1943 that she met former soldier Dave Brown. Brown had been evacuated from Greece at the same time as her husband was left behind. 2 years later, he was discharged from the army with what doctors then called anxiety state. Today we call it post-traumatic stress. Struggling with the demons of war, Dave Brown cried when he told Gladys how much he loved her. So began another bewildering chapter in the story of Gladys and the Brunswick boys.